happened to these girls? What happened to your ex-wife? What did you do with them?
Are you accusing me that I killed them? Or
I'm accusing you of murder, Tony, and I want to know what happened.
did I personally kill them?
You gonna answer? What's this?
With a knife or whatever?
You are gonna be booked for a triple murder.
Do it.
That way.
Do it.
You're trying to tell me you had nothing to do with it.
This guy is
my friend.
stupid.
You're done.
It's very
You're
stupid.
done.
I came to this location on a follow-up on a missing persons report.
Detective John Lynch is looking for 3 people.
Mother and her 2 teenage daughters who had basically fallen off the face of the earth.
37-year-old Lucy Musino and her daughters Edith and Gabriela were reported missing by a friend the day after Thanksgiving.
And this was the last location that they were known to be at.
Detective Lynch enters Musino's apartment and finds it empty, except for a few small signs of foul play.
In checking the carpet, I noticed a brownish red, which potentially could have been blood. I then noticed around the baseboards, around the door, and the floorboard area, there were what appeared to be blood spatter marks.
Detectives saw or noticed a very large red-brown stain.
Steve Renteria is a criminalist with the LA County Crime Lab.
In the closet, they showed me a stain that pretty much took up the whole area of the interior of the closet.
Renteria runs chemical tests on the stain and determines it to be human blood.
After that, the detectives pointed out a certain area in this second bedroom. In this area here was the second stain, about 4 inches in diameter.
The second stain also tests positive for human blood. Renteria decides to coat the apartment with luminol.
We started in this bedroom and we sprayed the entire carpet area. Obviously, the area where there was blood gave a positive result, but then we started noticing a trail or a path about 2 feet wide that came from that blood stain through the doorway, a continuous reaction all the way down the hallway, and it looped around all the way back into the closet where the larger stain was located. My gut feeling is somebody probably bled out and somebody either had died or was near death, but without doing any scientific experiments as far as how much blood volume it would have to take to see that pattern, we weren't really able to say that to the detective, but inside I knew something bad had really happened.
We didn't really know if we had their true names.
Detective Lynch's missing persons case is beginning to look more and more like homicide, a matter further complicated by the fact that Lucy Musino and her daughters are undocumented aliens.
Again, no relatives on Luz's side at all. We found no one that was interested in these people besides their friends.
Lynch's only lead is Lucy's live-in boyfriend, Estanislao Gonzalez. At the time of the disappearance, Gonzalez was seen packing up and moving out of the apartment by the building manager.
She was real surprised by this because he had signed a year lease for this place, and less than a week later, he's moving out. So she asked him what was going on, and he said, well, we're not getting along, and she's going back to Mexico, and I'm leaving.
Detectives are unable to locate Gonzalez. In 1994, forensic technology cannot identify the blood found in the closet. And so the investigation hangs in limbo.
You have to prove that a crime has occurred, and we weren't able to show that from the blood that we had at the time and the technology at the time, we could only show that that was human blood. You know, we suspected who it belonged to, but you still have to prove it.
This is the cold case homicide room of the Downey Police Department.
Sergeant Jim Alsasser is closing in on retirement when he decides to take a shot at one of Downey PD's most puzzling cases.
We had no idea where the suspects were, and maybe the biggest stumbling blocks is we had no idea where the bodies were. We just had 3 missing persons with a lot of blood, evidence at the scene that we were unable to analyze.
Like many in the department, Alsasser suspects Lucy Musino and her daughters are dead, and that the key to the case lies with Musino's boyfriend, Estanislao Gonzalez.
I knew that there was a good likelihood that this man had killed those children. And when I was doing my investigation on it, I ended up getting photographs of these girls, 8x11 photographs. And I had one for each child. And every time you get a little tired or discouraged or something, you look at the pictures of these children and you just realize, hey, you know, this guy killed him and he's getting away with it, and he's got away with it for 5 years. And I was going to do what I could do to find him.
On the morning of September 9th, 1999, Sergeant Alsasser sits down at a computer terminal and begins to search for Estanislao Gonzalez. 6 hours later, he develops a lead.
I ran his vehicle identification number, and I ran it through US DMV, which is we can get license information from all across the United States. And even though his license plates no longer were on file, the VIN came up, and he had just registered that vehicle in Las Vegas.
Alsasser gets on the phone with Las Vegas police, who are able to confirm Gonzalez's whereabouts.
They did a stakeout on the house. They saw him come home. They saw his vehicle. I knew he was there.
Finding Gonzalez is one thing, building a case for murder quite another.
We're at the LA County Sheriff's Department Crime Lab, where we analyzed evidence in the Gonzalez case.
By 1999, DNA technology is advancing rapidly and bringing detectives ever closer to identifying the blood found at the scene of the disappearance.
This is the bloodstain that we found in the second bedroom. A lot of these cases that we get, if we don't get results right away, some of these cases, in fact most of them, we always have in our back of our mind, you know, if a future technology develops, this might be a good case to bring back out. This is the underpadding. In fact, in this particular case, I had portions of the carpet actually in my work area all the way back from 1994, and on a daily basis, I would actually see them in my work area, and it would remind me that when this new technology was in place and we were able to do it, that this would be a perfect case to do future work. The results we got from bloodstain 1, which was from the closet, and bloodstain 2, which was from the bedroom number 2, told us that the 2 different bloodstains originated from 2 different individuals, that they were related to each other, and that they were from 2 females.
The blood of 2 related females, sisters perhaps, or a mother and daughter. The results are consistent with foul play and the disappearance of Lucy Musino and her daughters, but not specific enough to be conclusive.
Anytime you try to prove a homicide with no bodies, that's a difficult case.
In the fall of 1999, Jim Alsasser retires after 30 years on the job, and the disappearance of Lucy Musino and her daughters once again goes cold.
Bottom line is, city of Downey, we have 100,000+ people. We have 3 people working robberies, homicides, and they're extremely busy. And we have robberies all the time. I know one year we had 19 homicides, and cold case files get a backseat sometimes to active cases.
It will take a new round of DNA testing and a fresh set of cold case detectives to turn up the heat on Estanislao Gonzalez.
Are you accusing me that I killed him, or?
I'm accusing you of murder, Tony, and I want to know what happened.
I first looked at this case in June of 2001.
Detective Gil Toledo is reviewing cold cases when he comes across the 1994 disappearance of Lucy Musino and her 2 daughters, Edith and Gabriela.
It was very intriguing. No bodies, and these people had been missing for several years.
By 2001, detectives have developed DNA profiles from a trail of blood found in the apartment.
The 2 different bloodstains originated from 2 different individuals. They were related to each other, and they were from 2 females.
So we wanted to try to identify them, and one way was to locate a relative that could provide us with some DNA through blood or saliva to compare with the blood we found in the apartment.
And what we learned after talking to the investigators, that there were 2 living children from the missing mother that were possibly with the suspect in Las Vegas.
The suspect in Las Vegas is Estanislao Gonzalez. Gonzalez fathered 2 of Musino's 4 children and abruptly skipped town with them when Lucy went missing.
And we told the detectives if they would be able to get a sample from those 2 living children, we would be able to compare the genetic profile from those children to the bloodstains found at the crime scene. And it would tell us, number one, if one of them could be the mother of the living children, and by default, the second stain would possibly be the daughter to that particular mother.
Downey detectives pack up and head for Vegas, gambling on a hunch that saliva samples from Lucy Musino's children will help unlock the mystery of her disappearance.
We came to the trailer and we decided to knock on the door and use a ruse that we were Child Protective Services.
Linda Turner is a detective in Las Vegas, called in by Downey PD to help make contact with Estanislao Gonzalez and his children.
He was very cooperative. He told us that we could look around his trailer, that we could talk to him, that we could talk to the kids.
And I began questioning him about the conditions of the mobile home, the children, whether they're attending school regularly. Normal questions that a social worker following up on something like this would normally ask.
The trailer was dirty. There was food, but it was very disorganized. There was dog feces inside the trailer.
I asked him, by the way, where's the mother of these children? And he appeared extremely startled.
And we asked them, where is your mother at? And I remember the twins just staring at us kind of blankly. They said they didn't have a mother. And I asked them if they remembered their mother. They said they did not.
I asked questions about what happened to her. He said that she left him long ago. I asked her if he knew where she was. He indicated that he didn't. He really wanted to avoid that line of questioning.
Gonzalez doesn't give up any new information, but detectives come away from the meeting with a connection they had hoped for.
And I pretty much laid the groundwork for a follow-up that I was going to come back in the near future to check the children's health, make sure they're okay, they're being fed, they're going to school. And that was the time we were planning on actually getting the saliva sample from the kids away from him.
So we knew the twins came here every day after school.
2 weeks later, detectives re-established contact with Gonzalez's children at a local Boys and Girls Club.
So we came here, told the twins we needed to do a health check on them. They remembered us. They were very cooperative, and we took 1 swab from the female and 1 swab from the male.
Back in LA County, Steve Renteria compares the children's DNA to profiles developed from the bloodstains found at the suspected crime scene.
What we found out was the DNA results from the 2 living children were consistent with being the natural children of the bloodstain we found in closet number 1. So by doing that, we were able to establish that that is where the mother bled out in that particular crime scene.
Cold case detectives believe they know where Lucy Musino died. Now they prepare to take down the man they suspect killed her.
At that point, we were excited. I mean, we were jumping out of our seats, wanting to go down there, and you know, obviously as investigators, we want to arrest this guy and get him off the street as fast as we can.
Before making an arrest, detectives place a wiretap on Gonzalez's phone and approach his sister Delia Mora in hopes of stirring the pot.
We asked her if she had seen or spoke to her brother, whether she knew the whereabouts of Luz Musino and the girls, and she denied any knowledge of them.
We had a team, a surveillance team on her watching the house, and immediately, within minutes, she packed up her car with another male, got on the freeway, and drove maybe about 20-25 minutes out of where they lived.
Detectives keep a tail on Mora as she pulls off the freeway and gets on a payphone.
The team that was watching her called us and said, hey, she's on payphone right now, she may be calling her guy. Sure enough, our guys in the wire call said, we got a call coming in.
Hello. ¿Qué pasó? ¿Cómo estás? Soy yo, Delia. Oye, no, estamos todos bien, fíjate, nomás que hay muy malas noticias.
Malas noticias. Ay.
Sí, quiero que te sientes y que te relajes. Mira, Danilo, vinieron hoy a mi casa, yo no sé cómo dieron con mi teléfono, con mi dirección, unas personas de homicidio, en el cual andan buscando a Lucy, a Gaby y a Eddie.
There was a pause in his conversation, almost again as if it sounded as if he was startled. He didn't know how to respond to it.
Pruebas, dice evidence muy contundentes, dice que tienen evidencias. No sé si estos babosos imbéciles quieren asustarme para quitarte a los niños, por eso te digo.
No sé qué hacer entonces. Pero no sé qué puedo hacer. Estoy haciendo mi vida aquí lo mejor posible, ya ves, bajo qué condiciones. Y
Ya lo sé.
y encima todavía tengo un problema así tan grande.
During the conversation, she offered to take him to Mexico, help him escape to Mexico.
¿Por qué no te llamo mañana y vamos a pensarlo bien? Tenemos que pensar algo. Si te quieres ir a México, vamos, yo te ayudo.
Ujú. Pues si es necesario, lo tendría que hacer por los hijos.
Once she made contact with him, we were not going to let him out of our sights. We just wanted to see what his reaction would be.
With Gonzalez now talking about a run for the border, detectives need to move quickly.
We didn't want him to get the children in fear of maybe if we end up trying to take him down, we'd have a hostage situation, or he may even harm the children.
Detectives know Gonzalez is headed to the Boys and Girls Club to pick up his children, and that's where they plan to take him down.
Gonzalez walked out of the Boys and Girls Club with the twins. He walked towards his car. As soon as he got in the vicinity of his vehicle, we stopped him.
When I first mentioned to him that I wanted to talk to him about the disappearance of Luz Musino, his jaw dropped and everything came tumbling down on him. He was very startled.
Detectives took him away across the parking lot to another vehicle, and my partner and I stayed with the twins as we already had a rapport with them. They were obviously upset seeing their dad being taken away. We stayed with them, comforted them.
You are going to be booked for a triple murder.
That's fine.
Gonzalez is arrested and taken in for questioning.
So we're going to deal with it that way.
Do it.
There, the detectives will find the suspect to be less than contrite.
This guy is
My friend, you're done. What if I told you that I had evidence that you did something to this woman?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't understand what you're saying.
An interview room in Las Vegas. Cold case detectives Gil Toledo and Dwayne Cooper turn up the heat on Estanislao Gonzalez, a man they suspect of murdering Lucy Musino and her two daughters, Edith and Gabriela.
What if I told you that when we went into that apartment, we found evidence of something happening to some people in that apartment? How would you answer that? How would you answer that, Tony?
He denied for the good majority of our interview. I became very accusatory. I accused him of murdering them.
I want you to tell me what happened, Tanya.
What happened?
I want you to tell me, Tanya, because you know
want
what?
me to tell you what happened? What?
I want it to happen with their bodies. What happened to these girls? What happened to your ex-wife? What did you do with them?
Are you accusing me that I killed them? Or?
I'm accusing you of murder, Tanya, and I want to know what happened.
I laid some things out to make him believe that we had a whole bunch of evidence that would implicate him in these murders.
And let me tell you something, you do a lot of things to a body. To burn it, dismember it, do all kinds of things to get rid of a body. But you know what? Tiny minute particles of DNA will still be around. Even if you bury it, we find stuff like that all the time. Tiny.
DNA. 3 little letters that appear to have a big impact on the suspect's demeanor.
We can prove it now.
Okay, now you can prove that I killed these people.
Yeah.
That I did this with my own hands, that I killed these people.
Yes, you're involved in their murders.
He stated, you think I killed them. You think I killed them. Well, he did that. He was motioning in a stabbing manner.
Or did I personally kill them?
You an answer? What's this?
With a knife or whatever?
Did you kill him with a knife?
Okay. With a gun? I don't know. Huh?
I don't know. I mean, you motion like this. What does that mean?
Okay, I'm sorry for this, okay?
Why be
Next
sorry
time
for
I'm
it?
gonna go like this, and then you go like this. How about that?
You made the motion.
Okay. Okay. Well, we are talking about people being murdered.
People could be murdered all kinds of different ways. Okay. Why did we go to that?
During the point of that interview, he became very angry with me.
You're gonna apologize to me one day.
I'm not gonna apologize.
You're gonna apologize?
I'm not gonna
and
unless
you're
you
gonna be
tell
sorry
unless you
for
tell
what
me-
you are doing right now to me.
Unless you tell me
Okay.
where their mother is.
Detective Cooper and Toledo had interviewed Gonzalez for over 5 hours.
Dennis Flynn is a detective with the Las Vegas Police Department. As questioning of Gonzalez reaches an impasse, Flynn is called in to transport the suspect to the county jail.
The ride to the jail was about a 15-minute drive.
Using the opportunity to do a little questioning of his own, Flynn takes on the classic good cop persona.
We were both divorced fathers, that we had both had 2 children. We knew what it was like for someone to try to take your children from you.
The suggestion that Lucy Messina was attempting to take the twins away seems to strike a chord with Gonzalez.
He then started to agree with me that the mere fact that she was going to take his children, the 2 twins, away from him, the thought of that made him enraged. And he began to start to confess.
As Gonzalez begins copping to knowledge of the murders, Sergeant Flynn heads back to the police station, back to the interview room.
I want to know what you can tell us about this incident.
Well, we pick up these 2 guys.
He told us that these 2 workers that he hired to help him move things out of the apartment that day were the ones that actually murdered Luz Messina and the girls.
And there's the 2 guys turned back and then push it inside of the apartment.
And his story just didn't make sense because he kept giving us some cockamamie reason why they would murder them.
Okay, so you just kind of ignored their screams and
In
cries
a
for
way,
help. Cries for help.
In that moment. Yes.
Okay, so they were crying. They were screaming for help. They were beat up. You know something was happening to them, correct?
Yeah.
And you decided, I didn't want no part of this. I'm getting out of here. That's pretty much what happened, right?
Gonzalez is trying to spin the facts to minimize his involvement, but can't avoid placing himself at the scene and providing detectives with details only the killer would know.
And at this point, you see bodies lying on the ground
Yes.
with blood.
Yes.
There's blood on the carpet.
Yes.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you know they've been killed. Okay?
At least for us, we got him to admit that these bodies were in fact, they weren't missing, they were in fact dead, murdered, and that he was forced to help them clean the bodies up and dispose of them in a riverbed.
You're trying to tell me now that they forced you to take them into your van?
It's closing in on 10 p.m., and detectives aren't buying Gonzalez's tale of furniture movers turned cold-blooded killers.
You know how much sense that makes? 0. Doesn't make any sense. People aren't that way. And you're saying these guys held you at bay with a knife and threatened to kill you. They were so concerned about getting those bodies out of that apartment they have no connection with, apartment that they've never even been to, people you don't even know. They were so concerned about getting these bodies out that they had you drive them 15 minutes away, dump the bodies, and they jumped out with those bodies.
Forget about that, okay?
We ain't gonna forget about that.
Don't forget that. Then go through there. I didn't kill them. I was not present when they were killed. I didn't witness anything, okay? I only witnessed my kid.
Okay.
Okay.
Then I'm gonna tell you something.
Yes.
You are gonna be booked for a triple murder.
That's fine.
You were involved in
That's
it,
fine.
and we're gonna show it.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
So we're gonna deal with
Do
it
it.
that way.
Do it.
You
Okay,
already
that's it.
basically
Do it. Okay.
confessed to this whole thing.
Confess.
Short of
I
saying
am-
you killed them, you moved them bodies. You were responsible
You are
for the
out of
bodies.
your way. You don't know
took
what you're
them out of
talking
there.
about.
You
And you're
dumped the
saying-
bodies in a riverbed, and
uh,
you're trying to tell me you had nothing to do with it.
This guy is
My friend,
stupid.
you're done.
It's very
You're
stupid.
done.
Okay?
Gonzalez is booked on the triple murder and enters a plea of innocent. As his trial date approaches, however, the suspect has a change of heart.
It was a death penalty type case, and his attorney approached this attorney's office, and eventually he confessed to these murders.
In a one-page statement, Estanislao Gonzalez admits to the murders and to dumping the bodies in the Nevada desert.
I think that was the biggest surprise of the whole case, was when we found out.
Details of Gonzalez's confession square with police department records of 3 Jane Does discovered on March 26, 1996.
The burial site is
right here on this corner.
Teeth and bone samples from the 3 Jane Does are tested and confirmed as belonging to Lucy Musino and her 2 daughters, Edith and Gabriela.
It's bittersweet when I come out here.
Today, their bodies rest here at the Palm Cemetery in Las Vegas.
I'm happy that they've been identified and they have a final resting place, but it's hard to come out here and know that, you know, she could be with her twins and see them as they grow up. But I'm glad that there's been some kind of resolution to the case and that they finally have some place to be, and the twins can come out and they can visit their mom whenever they want to.
Lucy Musino's surviving twins are currently living in a foster home in Las Vegas. As for their father, Estanislao Gonzalez, he will be spending the rest of his life in a California prison.
I told him point blank, I said, look, I know you know where Patty Jo is. I know that you did something to her. And I begged him to please just tell me where she is. And he kept saying, I don't know where she's at. I did not do anything to her. I said, I just want you to have one last thing to remember our family by. And I slapped him so hard, so hard. But that, believe it or not, made me feel so much better.
I always keep a picture. Anytime I work an investigation, I keep a picture of the person missing or the victim, because you always look back and the person is not just a number or not just something that fades away.
Keith Isom is an investigator in Pittsylvania County, Virginia. He doesn't investigate a lot of homicides, but the ones he does get, he takes personally.
It's someone that actually lived and had a family and had thoughts and had breath, and now possibly something has happened to them. And so you keep reminding yourself that why you're going forward is for that person that you got that photo.
The picture Isom holds close belongs to Patty Jo Pulley. On May 16, 1999, her pickup truck is found abandoned near Highway 62. Patty Jo herself is missing.
My first intuition was, well, she met someone and left. I mean, just without knowing anything, because the truck, the way it was parked. The truck was parked there as if someone was gonna come back and get it, or as if it was placed there neat, nice, not to have any damage done to it.
Too much going on, David.
Patty Jo is about the last person Detective Isom would expect to skip town.
Pedro, what did you think about this trip?
Married to a local pastor, Rick Pulley, she has helped to form a spiritual basis for the community, and on the surface, seems to enjoy a perfect marriage.
They were involved in almost every aspect of our church. Rick and Patty Jo worked with our worship team, and they worked with our young people. And with the youth ministry, there was a lot of outward ministry, mission work. They did a mission trip at least once a year.
Randy Sedeth is the lead pastor at Rick Pulley's church. Judy is his wife.
In church, she would lay her head on his shoulder, so there was obvious affection there.
They seemed to be a happy couple. Only concern we would have had would have been that they were maybe too committed to the church ministries, and we were trying to get them to rest a little bit more, do some things outside of church, outside of mission.
On the surface, everything looked fine. Of course, everyone has little problems, but as you begin to look behind the scenes, and that's where you start finding out that everything is not as it appears.
18 hours after Patty Jo went missing, Detective Isom drives to Rick Pulley's home to talk to him about his missing wife.
Well, when I first came here, my intention was to give him my card, introduce myself to him, and if there's any way we could be of any assistance, you know, to let us know. And when I saw Mr. Rick Pulley for the first time, that's when I realized the scratches, the wounds on his face, and I realized at that time I needed to take a statement from him.
The scratches on Pulley's face are deep and numerous. Rick Pulley claims he fell into a convenient briar patch.
This is my toolkit.
What started out as a courtesy visit to a concerned husband quickly morphs into a Q&A with a possible suspect.
The reason I wanted to tape it was simply because of the marks on his face. At that point, I felt there was a different side of this story, and the only way I really knew to get to it was just sit down with him and just talk to him, let him talk to me.
I'd taken the van and taken her into work so I could take the van and have the tire fixed.
The pastor claims he last saw his wife at 6 p.m. on the night she disappeared. Pulley says he spent the rest of the night at the local high school.
And then he got talking about the play at Dan River High School. What time did you get there for the play?
About 7:15, 7:20, I think.
Had the play started?
It already started.
It just so happened that night I was at the exact same play, and he didn't know this.
Maybe it's coincidence, luck, or perhaps a bit of both. But Isom's own son was in the same school play that night, and the detective was in the audience, watching the whole thing.
And asking questions about the play, how did it end, he began fumbling through it. What was the last scene?
I don't remember. You mean the name of it?
No. What happened? What happened up on stage, the last act?
The last act was the lovers finally come together and everything is consummated with their relationship, and it ends with that. It's happy ever after.
His final answer was that both couples came together and they lived happily ever after, which I knew that wasn't true because one of the main characters in one of the couples, dies.
The investigator believes Rick Pulley is lying and wonders why. Isom then asks the pastor to take off his shirt.
And of course, taking off his shirt, he had a few scratches on his arms that, to me, consistent with briars. But what really stood out to me was he had some scratch marks here on his chest, but also these 4 elongated bruises on his right bicep. When I looked at the bruises was consistent with Patty Jo reaching up, grabbing him with her left hand on his right bicep, and also reaching up with her right hand and scratching his face. That's why when I looked at that, that's exactly what this picture told me.
Detective Isom's suspicion only deepens when a few days later, an eyewitness surfaces.
He was walking right along this area right here.
Robert Rowland is a self-described good old boy. 2 days after Patty Jo Pulley disappeared, Rowland tells police about a man he saw near the missing woman's pickup.
So when I pulled and started talking to this fella, he turned and tried to hide from me and looked over his shoulder.
Thinking that the man's truck had broken down, Rowland stops and offers him a lift.
T-shirt was torn, had something hanging down on his side, and it was ripped, looked like a sheet or something like that. Right. And he told me, he said, I'm all right, just go on.
Robert Rowland identifies a photograph of Rick Pulley as the man he met on the side of the road.
When they showed me the photo, I said, that's the fellow right there.
That was the fellow that the photo was shown. That was the fellow you saw seen walking up 62.
Yes.
Pastor Rick Pulley is now the prime suspect in his wife's disappearance and possible murder. There is, however, still a question of motive. Detective Isom begins that inquiry with a small event that happened the night before Patty Jo Pulley disappeared.
Patty Jo went to Winn-Dixie, which is a grocery store here, and she got up to the cash register and wrote a check, and it bounced. They wouldn't take it. So here she is, a dignified woman, a very proud woman as far as a pillar of the community down there where she lives, and they won't take her check. So I'm sure she was very humiliated and embarrassed.
Phone records shed light on the source of the couple's money woes. Rick Pulley, it appears, was a sex addict, racking up nearly $1,000 a month in calls to 900 sex lines.
We all put on masks and try to present ourselves a certain way in front of everyone else, but once you go behind closed doors, you take the mask off. So at this point, is the person that everyone perceived him to be in the community is what he actually was behind closed doors, or whether there's another Rick Pulley that no one knew about.
It appears the local pastor was leading 2 lives. The question for investigators, was he willing to kill his wife in order to keep his secret?
So they searched the area, trying to find a scent, looking for her or anyone that may have left the truck.
6 months after Patty Jo Pulley disappeared, investigator Keith Isom walks the area looking for her remains.
It's a thing of every night, I lay in bed trying to figure out where she could be. I looked everywhere I knew here in Virginia, on this side of the river, along the roads, knowing she was somewhere here, but not knowing exactly where.
One person apparently not as concerned with Patty Jo's whereabouts, her husband Rick. 3 months after the disappearance, he leaves town, moves to southwestern Virginia, and literally never looks back.
You know, he didn't start it all over again up there, a new life. I never heard again from him. Never called, asked me how the case was going or anything. So he sort of forgot about me, but I didn't forget about him.
Detective Isom believes Pastor Pulley to be his killer. The problem, without a body, there is no case to be made for murder.
I just need a body. You know, I've got all the circumstantial evidence together, and once you put the pieces of the puzzle together, you've got a picture. But until I've got that body, then the picture's there. But the most important element is missing, and that's the crime.
For 3 years, Patty Jo Pulley has lived among the missing. Then, in December 2002, a project geologist takes a walk under a bridge, one that places Patty Jo forever among the dead.
As I was just working, you know, I just heard something crunch under my foot, and my first impression, my first thought was, well, I stepped on a, skeleton of a deer. But then when I looked down, and I noticed that there was a bra. Because I didn't see a skull or anything like that. It was just bones and what appeared to be a bra across the bones.
So the mass of the skeletal remains was in this area right here.
That's correct.
Investigators arrive and begin to process the scene.
We conducted an excavation of the skeletal remains and successfully recovered in excess of 95% of the skeletal remains, which is very uncommon. Once we got down to where the entire skeletal was visible, we began photographing, began searching for other physical evidence.
Scraps of clothing, as well as dental records, confirmed the remains to be those of Pulley. A length of rope tells investigators Patty Jo was murdered.
This was very crucial, and what this indicated was the possibility or potential binding of the victim or possibly being used as a weapon for strangulation purposes.
The recovery of the remains, the ropes that were found with the remains, basically led from a missing person case from Virginia evolving into a homicide investigation for North Carolina.
Investigation's license. You're sort of disappointed that she's dead, but it's a relief now that you can go ahead with it.
Detective Keith Isom worked the original missing persons case and gets cold case detectives up to speed.
I took everything I had, everyone I'd interviewed, every tape I had, every photograph, and handed it to them, said, here's the case, go through the case, and you'll see the puzzle, you can put it together.
I think the photographs that were taken by the investigators from the Pittsylvania County Sheriff's Department were clearly one of the most crucial pieces of evidence in the case.
These pictures, taken a day after Patty Jo disappeared, are of deep scratches found on the face, arm, and chest of Patty Jo's husband, Rick Pulley, longtime suspect in a missing person case, now turned murder.
We were of the opinion that their theory that Mr. Pulley appeared to be involved was correct.
He had 3 scrapes or scratches on his left cheek.
In 1999, Rick Pulley told investigators that cuts on his face came from a fall into a thicket of briars.
Were somewhat rectangular, slightly linear. And
a forensic pathologist at Wake Forest University, Dr. Patrick Lantz, evaluates that possibility.
So I just went out and just sort of thrust my arm into a briar patch to see what would happen. And of course, like most people would know, I got some superficial scratches on my forearm. And with enough effort, you might actually get one to bleed. But for the most part, these are fairly linear. They're more irregular, not nearly as wide as the injuries we saw on Mr. Pulley's cheek and face.
Dr. Lentz's findings helped to explode Pulley's story about a fall into a briar patch. With the discovery of Patty Jo's body, detectives believe they have enough to charge Rick Pulley. Now they have to find him.
It's like a place you would go if you wanted to hide and get away, you know, not be found.
Connie Winslow is Patty Jo Pulley's niece. For nearly 3 years, Winslow has kept tabs on Rick Pulley, tracking him to the small town of Lebanon, Virginia.
I begged him to please just tell me where she is, and he kept saying, I don't know where she's at, you know, I did not do anything to her.
In Lebanon, Rick Pulley has again become a church leader and a trusted member of the community. Connie Winslow, however, refuses to let him walk away.
I told him, I said, you know what? I said, I just want you to have one last thing to remember our family by. And I slapped him so hard. But that, believe it or not, made me feel so much better.
We found that Mr. Pulley was at his work, which is at this residence right here is where he was doing his counseling at that time.
In February of 2003, Rick Pulley gets a second visit from his past. This time, it is in the form of the local chief of police, with a warrant for the pastor's arrest.
When I got here, found him alone and very cooperative, and went ahead and transported him up to the sheriff's office where the detectives waited to question him.
This here was when we went to pick up Rick in Lebanon. This is what he looked like when he was sitting in the jail in the holding cell.
In 4 short years, Rick Pulley has changed from a brown-haired young man of 43 to a white-haired shell at 47. Detective Isom chalks it up to the corrosive effect of guilt.
We all have consciences, and no matter how we may want to portray ourselves one way, there's always a little something inside that eats on us.
The guilt that has gnawed on Rick Pulley is finally realized in the form of a set of cuffs and a ride back to North Carolina to await trial for murder.
This life, which is left in the form of a skull and bones and restraints, all came from this beautiful woman.
At trial, Caswell County District Attorney Joel Brewer tells the story of the perfect marriage, which somehow took a wrong turn to murder.
She's working cleaning houses to try to make ends meet, and he's making telephone sex calls and running up huge telephone bills.
The DA doesn't have DNA or fingerprints. What he does have, the gashes on Rick Pulley's face, scratching out the identity of a killer.
We told the jury at the beginning of our final argument that in Genesis, the Lord set a mark on Cain, and then we began to explain to the jury how the mark was set upon Ricky Pulley by Patty Jo, and what this told to Keith Isom.
And pretty much the best witness on the whole thing was Patty Jo, to where she left a mark on Rick's face and his body. Because if it had not been for that, it's a good possibility he'd have got away with murder.
On October 29th, 2004, Rick Pulley is convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
It's justice for Patty Jo. And now the family, even though they'll always miss her, there's some type of closure.
You're gonna put it on the roadside or this side?
On a cold January morning, the family of Patty Jo Pulley places a cross near the bridge where her remains were found.
Well, try it, hit it on that side another time or two.
We let her lay there 3.5 years, and he knew where she was and we didn't. She was our baby, and we had a lot of good times, didn't we, Rita?
I didn't want the death penalty for him. I thought it would be too easy. I think knowing him and the type of person he is, what he has now, life in prison without parole, is exactly what he needs. It's the worst thing for him.